So we were really young when we met. I was in college and he was actually in school. He was just a normal teenage lad, and he was doing everything his friends were doing. He was really popular. Yeah, he was just a happy-go-lucky guy. Just a nice lad. Bit wild, but yeah.
So what was your relationship like with Liam before drugs and alcohol became a problem?
Well, I mean, it was just I suppose, typical. We had a typical young people's relationship, young person's relationship. We'd go out and enjoy time out with friends. Liam always had to take it to the extreme. He would always be out until the last minute, the last one standing. And I could never do that, so I had to go home and go to bed on my own. But yeah, he was, at first, it was fine. It was just young love, I suppose. And yeah, and then when we got married and had the children, I thought it was settled down, but it didn't quite.
So do you think it was at that point that you started to become concerned about Liam's behaviour?
I think I was concerned about his behaviour, but I didn't really know what my concern was. So I always think of it as like kind of fighting a battle that I didn't know I was fighting, because I tried to get him to kind of settle down a bit and maybe not be going out as much, staying out all night, tried to encourage him to be at home with the family more, but he just resisted and I couldn't understand why. So I was concerned, but I didn't know why. And then when I did find cocaine for the first time, even at that point, I just thought, oh, he's used it a couple of times. It's okay, he'll not do it again, it'll be fine. So, yeah.
So what time do you think you realised that it was an addiction?
So Liam used to work with his dad for a recruitment company, and it was coming to like a pinnacle point because he and his dad were selling the company, and it was a moment that was supposed to change all of our lives for the better. And the week leading up to that, he was away from the house practically 24/7. He told me that he was clearing up the office, but it would be like in the middle of the night. And even at that point, I didn't think, oh, it's drugs or anything. I just thought this isn't right. And then the day that he sold the business, really went downhill from there. And I found out that he'd been cheating. And basically that's when everything kind of fell apart. I made him leave the home, and he crashed 4 cars in a week. And then slowly but surely I kind of came to realise that he was using drugs, and a lot of drugs, and he wasn't able to stop. So it was kind of over the course of, I'd say, a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, and kind of started to click what was actually going on.
So can you explain to us how that whole situation made you feel?
So for a long time, I just felt like I was being a bit of a nag, really, because I was like, oh, please don't be staying out all night, please don't be drinking all the time, I need to spend some time with the family. And I used to get really paranoid, that he was going out and flirting with other girls, and that he just didn't want to be at home with me or the children. So I felt worthless, really, and I felt confused. I didn't understand why he was behaving the way he was, because he was telling me that he loved me and he wanted to be there, but then his actions weren't showing that. He was really good at lying, and I didn't know that straight away, but he was very, very good at telling lies. He got all his friends to kind of keep things from me. His family didn't know anything. So I just felt a bit pathetic really, I guess. And just really alone, really misunderstood. And just like I wasn't married to the man that I thought I was marrying. Yeah, it was really, and that was for a long, long time. And I just, I stuck with it because I loved Liam and I believe in marriage and we had our children and I wanted everything to be okay. So, yeah.
So you spoke about your relationship with Liam before drugs and alcohol became a problem. How would you describe your relationship during Liam's addiction?
Yeah, so when I knew it was addiction and, I mean, it took Liam several times, several relapses before he was able to stay clean. At first it was almost like looking after another child, I felt like I had to have my eyes and ears everywhere he was. I was checking up where he was going, took his bank cards off him, I was checking up with his friends. It was really hard work. I was looking through bins, looking for evidence for for empty bags, and I bought drug testing, and I said I was going to drug test him. I needed to start trusting my instincts because I knew when something wasn't right, and even then it would probably take several days before he would finally admit that, yeah, okay, I've used again. So it was really hard work, and I felt really paranoid and on edge. And actually, I've been quite ill over myself over the years, and I think looking back, it was a result of kind of Liam's addiction, really.
So how do you think you coped during that time?
Oh gosh, it's funny how things happen, isn't it? But I mean, just prior to Liam's addiction kind of coming out, I'd just done a lot of work on myself, been spending a lot of time with a therapist, and I was probably at my strongest when Liam's addiction kind of come to the surface. So I just kept going and going and going and going like you do. I was kind of running on adrenaline for a long time. So yeah, and I had the support of my family as well, and Liam's family were all brilliant, so they were able to help me to make sure that the children were safe. But I think if you're dealing with a family member who's an addict, I think educating yourself about addiction is really important, and that was the first thing I did. There are support groups that you can go to, and which I did do that when he was in the Priory, but not really when he came out. But just putting boundaries in place. I needed to put my boundaries in place, be really clear on what I was willing to accept and what I wasn't, and knowing that it was entirely out of my hands. And I think once you come to that realisation that there is nothing you can do to stop an addict from acting out, or then it kind of brings you a little bit of peace, because then you think, yeah, I can't do anything about this. All I can do is just hope and pray that they find the strength to get into recovery. Oh, yeah.
So at what point did things start to change for the better?
So obviously, as soon as Liam stopped using, that was obviously a really big thing. But that can't be the only thing that they've got to do. Liam works really, really hard on his recovery, 24/7. Going to meetings, carrying the message to other people that are struggling, obviously through his work, and also through attending his fellowship meetings. We've done a lot of work together, Liam and I. We've had counselling together, and like I said, I've had to do my own work on myself as well. So I think a combination of everything means that these days life is much different, much better. I mean, it is hard sometimes being married to an addict, because you know, he's got to go off and do his meetings and really got to put his recovery first before anything else, even before me, even before the children. Because without his recovery, he's got nothing and we've got nothing. But yeah, life is much better these days.
So, can you expand a little bit on how life has gotten a lot better since?
Yeah, so Liam tells the truth these days, which is lovely, because he was constantly lying and living a lie before, even to himself. He was lying to himself as much as anybody else. So I trust him 100%. I trust myself. So I know now that, you know, if I feel that something is off, you know, I'm going to trust myself in questioning what's happening. You know, he's there, he's present for me, he's present for the children. He's a really good dad and a good husband. He's focused on, you know, his work and, you know, helping other people. It's a really, really good thing that's come out of such an awful time. So I'm really proud of him. And yeah, we're just happy, making plans for the future, and it's just nice. Yeah.
So, lastly, what advice would you?
So I would say, educate yourself, understand addiction, understand that it's an illness and it's really hard for that person who's struggling, because essentially they're unwell and they need help. Make sure you've got your own boundaries in place. You have to protect yourself, because an addict, you know, as much as it's that person you love, when they're in that cycle of addiction, their addiction comes first, not everything else comes second, and they'll never make the right choices when they're under the influence or when they're acting out. So they say, detach with love. So let them, you know, you've got to let them get on with what they're doing themselves, and make sure that you keep yourself safe. And all you can do is just be there for them when they're ready. And just speak to people about it, because the more you talk to people, the more you realise that other people have actually gone through these things. It's not an uncommon thing, it's really common in one form or another, and there's so many people out there that do understand, but they just, I don't know, for some reason don't talk about it. So yeah.